This is going to be a long-term video and it will be several years before I release this material, because I'm going to take cuttings of all these elms, root them, plant them together in a forest and grow them out as a forest. Hey, this is Jelle growing bonsai, and don't you love elms? And don't you love forests? And don't you love elm forest? Hang on, I've not frequently seen elm forests. Now I happen to have a lot of different varieties and species of elm. Most of these I have judged to be Chinese elms, and some with a small variegated leaf, some the cultivar Frosty with very variegated leaves. I have this one which is just a wild version of Chinese elm, or maybe an Ulmus minor, and normal field elm, and this is a Chinese elm with corky bark. And I've been thinking, can I make a forest out of this stuff? And if so, how? My conclusion is, yes I can. And I don't think there will be anything worth looking at for the next 3 years. So that's at least how long it's going to take. Now, there's an airplane coming over, so I'm going to switch off the camera, take my cuttings and get back to you. I don't need to explain to you how I take cuttings. Now I assume that you all know how I take cuttings. Of course, I don't want to bore the people that are often on my channel. I know there's quite a few frequent visitors. Thank you very much for joining me every once in a while. So if this is new for you and you're wondering what I'm doing, look for the link down in the description on rooting elm cuttings, because I have a video on this technique, how to do this and how to root elm successfully. I think 9 out of 9 cuttings in that video rooted. And meanwhile I'm just going to populate this pot. As per usual, I've got my rooting hormone, I've got my cuttings, my scissors and a plastic baggie, and I'll just put the whole thing together, put it in the shade, wait for a month or 2, and these will root. And then I'll continue with this video, planting up, growing it out. Early August, and we have success. First growth is happening, but I'm just going to leave this in the baggie until the weather cools down again and we have rain, and then I'll remove the baggie and leave it for the rest of the year. These are now growing so fast that I really want them to start to get used to the outside air, but I'm not sure how to do that with this baggie without ruining it, without breaking it. So I'm just going to pull it up a little bit, so that it just has a little bit of an opening here, and it still sits over it, but it is going to allow the air to ventilate a little bit. Just for a peek, look at how well these are doing. Growth everywhere. So let's not ruin it by being impatient. This is going to go back over, but as said, with a little bit of an opening to ventilate. And when the rain begins to fall, it's cloudy, it's going to be rainy for the next couple of days. I think it is time. I think it's time to take a risk, remove the baggie. Now look at this nice growth. Late August, still quite a few weeks, maybe even months of growth ahead. This will do fabulously next year. I think not a single one of these cuttings died so far. Now of course it shouldn't be hot and sunny the next couple of days, but it will stay in the shade and yeah, do its thing. A year has passed already, and look at this. I think this is quite a successful crop. I have a few small ones dead, but I have here the Frosty one. This is the normal field elm. There's a cork bark here. So I think of most of the species, cuttings have rooted. Now I could of course pull these out and plant them up individually, but I, to be honest, don't have the space, and it is the middle of summer, which is not always optimal, so I'm just going to let these go. I'm going to pay attention a little bit, because now some of these are really starting to push, and it might hamper the development of the smaller ones here in the middle, and I'm going to make sure that they don't get shaded out so much that they die off. But so far that's not an issue. If it does start happening, then I'm just going to gently pull off the lower leaves of these fast growing ones, just like this. That way sunlight will go in to the pot, and also the smaller ones on the inside will stay alive. And then in winter or in early spring I will start taking these out. and I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do. Whether I'm going to grow these out in individual pots or whether I'm going to put them in a nice pot straight away and grow them as a landscape in a pot and just use the different growing speeds to get different sizes in trunks. Alright, we're now in August and I'm getting a little bit worried that this is all getting way too long and full. So let me just gently thin out branches that grow to the inside or ones that are really getting very long. This way I reduce the effect of root competition, but also light, nutrients, water. I don't want the smaller ones on the inside to die on me. I'm not going to propagate all these. No, I really have way too many elms. I don't need any more. This is all I'm doing at this stage, and I'll look at it again in winter. That's when I'm going to pull them out of the pot and plant them up. Alright, I know I said I wasn't going to do it, but this video is turning into a contradiction to itself. I am going to do it. I don't have a nice pot. I got this little tray. I'm going to put a bit of the builder's mesh in it. That's this stuff. And then I'm not going to create any framework or whatsoever. I'm just going to put a shallow layer of substrate and then plant all of these in. I'm going to cut them fairly short. I'm just going to let it run for the year. And then in fall, the young twigs I'll wire out. By that time there will be a nice solid mass of roots, and next year or in 2 years time I'll pull it out. But for now I'm just going to plant these up. This is kaki. This is a small leaved lilac. This is one of my Japanese maples. I am not sure which. Then I've got elms. And I've got more elms, and I need to check. I am sure that I have something else that I can put in here. I'll let you know when I find something. These of course are way too tall. Let me just prune them back to lower side branches where available. Or just lower. Now, there are a few very simple basic rules for forest plantings, and that is there needs to be variation in size of the trees, where the two biggest trees are a little bit apart from each other and the smaller trees are composed around it. Then you don't want them all to be in a nice straight line. They should be at different distances from each other, and ideally some of them are really close to each other and others are a little bit further, a little bit more spacing. And I'm going to make a multiple species one, so that's going to be a little bit more complex. I have no idea how that's going to work. Now, if you look at these, I already of course created very nice and small root balls for these, so it might be very easy to plant them up, you think. The problem is, if you want to get them close, you really have to get a root ball that is very small. Now, and of course the trees, if they have movement, the movement should align with each other. This is always a little bit of a tricky game, so I'm going to have to play around a little bit with these. As said, I can still wire them out later this year, so it's not all that critical. Important to realize, multiple species. I'm not going to mix them up because they grow so differently, but I'm going to put all the elms in this area and then these other trees more on this edge. So you get a real transition. Big elms, smaller elms and other smaller trees and shrubs. I don't know how it's going to look. It might look awful afterwards, but you know what? There's only one way to find out. Just do it. Now these are the rooted cuttings. Doesn't look like cuttings, does it? That's a shallow root ball. Now the sun is setting and I just heard my neighbor bring out the lawnmower. So it might be that I switch off the sound in a second. That's not because I don't want you to know what I'm doing, but it's just going to be way too loud if he really starts mowing his lawn. And as said, I'm just going to prune these back roughly in a shape that's useful, but besides that I'm not doing much. Shortening the roots. just like that. Then have a tiny little plant that I can plant up. Keeping them out of the wind and sun is very useful. It is early spring, so root reductions like this are not a problem for most of these trees. Now I said I'm going to be able to wiggle them around a little bit. This is going to be the biggest tree. This I will need to prune more, but for the rest I think this is a nice group. And if you look from this side, you can see pretty much every single trunk individually, and none of them crosses the other. And that is one of the other aspects that is important in a root, in a forest. Now I'm just going to cover this with a little bit of substrate. This is not the final substrate layer, but this will hold it in place and will stop the roots from drying out too much. And this is also how I will plant up the rest. I'm just going to add them to the planting, push the roots in the substrate and add a little bit of substrate over it. This of course is a very, very delicate way of planting it up. It's not very stable. So if you have a lot of animals in your garden and you have pets, then this might not work. I have the option to put this away from where most of the animals come. I have a little greenhouse, and that might help me in not having this pushed over. So you see I'm taking some of these very small cuttings and I'm putting them in the front, and I'm putting some in the back as well, to really create this perspective, foreground, background planting, and I'm filling it up just like that. I'm not going to talk to you and show you what I'm doing as I'm doing it, because I get distracted and then I start making very, very ugly plantings, and that is not what I'm after. I might still make an ugly planting, mind you, but this way I might actually avoid it a little bit if I pay attention to the plants rather than to the camera. See you in a second. Now with these done, it is time for a few kaki and the lilac and the maple to go in as well. So I'll just bare root these and plant them, add them to the composition, and then just show you what it looks like. Look at these roots, all on a little cutting. But I'm really sorry, little cutting. Now you have fewer roots, and now even fewer. Now you're an ideal size. Prune back to lower buds. And then I can just add it here, a little bit to the side, on the forefront, with substrate. I think everything now has a place. I've added a little azalea in the background. I don't think it will look good, but you never know. As this matures, it might. I'm now just going to fill it up further with substrate, all the way to the rim. Then I'm gently going to tap it so that everything settles, water it well, and then of course I'm going to put it in the greenhouse in a shaded position so it doesn't dry out all that quickly. And then in the next 2 weeks I think it will just start sprouting all over. Early May, I'm quite happy with how this is developing. I think this might become actually just a clip and grow kind of tree. But not with these scissors, of course. To be honest, I'm not sure that I want to wire, but at this point these have all settled in. So I'm just going to reduce the significant growth and then just see what I'm left over with. And then just see what's left over and take it from there. But these big elms need big pruning. Get us back into profile. So this is going to be a problem. This is just going to overwhelm the rest of the forest at some point. But we'll see how this goes. Who knows? Maybe with increased ramification. Always pruning towards buds that grow outward rather than inwards, to really get that structure to grow outside of inside. Japanese maple here doing quite well. This is nice. All pruned back. This can now go back into the sun and grow a little bit more. I expect lots of back budding on the inside, but also I expect these smaller ones to now do much better because the big ones are not overwhelming it so much. But all in all, I must say I'm actually quite pleased with this composition and how it is turning out. And that's not bad, right? For I think it's all propagated in the last year. Let it just grow for the season, and every couple of weeks I'll pull it out and I'll do another pruning session, because really I want to keep the tops in check. I really want lower branches to start forming, and then I'm not going to wire them, I'm just going to prune them so that they naturally get a more cascading shape. Unbelievable. 4 weeks in, look how this has regrown. I guess all we can do is prune it back again. Thinned extensively and now ready to go back in the sun for another couple of weeks of growth. And then yeah, in winter maybe I'll wire it out, but for now the rest of the season probably can just grow. Let's see. You know what? Second week of August. This thing is growing insane. I can just keep on pruning this, and I might have made a mistake in putting these large leaf elms in here. They just grow too fast. They don't ramify all that well. So maybe next year I will do an experiment and I'll start defoliating these every once in a while. But right now, just pruning, pruning, pruning. And particularly in top, I need to prune lots to aid in keeping them nice and thin. Otherwise they really quickly overtake the rest of the forest. Now I've pruned everything that is not growing outwards. So everything in this direction grows outwards, 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 outwards. And I try to continuously remove everything that tips that balance. So a cluster like this is quite heavy and might disturb, and this might disturb the overall image. So I'm just reducing this drastically, so that this branch that goes outward is more clearly visible. And I hope that by doing that consistently over time, the whole forest grows outwards. From the center of the forest, everything moves out. It's December. Is it December? I think it's the 1st of December. Otherwise it is close enough to not matter. It's winter. This trees on this little forest is starting to really show the signs of it. Leaves are dropping. I'm going to aid it a little bit in getting rid of the leaves, getting rid of all the weeds that have grown in between. Going to clean up the surface here so that I can really see what's happening and can show you what this forest now looks like. This of course is not a finished forest. I can follow it for another 2 or 3 years, but if you want to follow along, then you are 5 years behind. So this is now, what is it, 3rd year I think, since I took the cuttings. And yeah, I'm actually quite pleased with it. Let me just defoliate this very quickly and get back. And then I'll get back to you. And now of course that we can see all the trees again properly, I can do a light pruning and reduce the length of a few things. Like here, this tree is getting really tall, and I can just say, you know, I'm going to prune this back a little bit. But this is something from now on I can decide whether I want to prune using scissors and shape the whole forest in that manner, or I decide no, I'm going to take wire and I'm going to wire out this forest every once in a while. To me this feels very much like a clip and grow development from here on. I'm now also removing all these little old stumps, because over summer I've of course been pruning multiple times. You can't really see what you're doing, and I've left a few stumps in place, so I need to remove those. But yeah, all in all, I think this forest is getting somewhere. It is a quick and dirty example of how you can use very cheap material, so basically seedlings and cuttings, and put them in a little forest planting together, and then over a few years develop something reasonably nice out of this. This is nowhere near a finished bonsai state. This is all still early development, but this is how I would tackle the challenge of producing something nice out of a whole bunch of seedlings and cuttings that I have sitting around anyway. In this case it's a multi-species composition, which is not something most people would make. But you can actually manage these if you keep track of pruning the different species at different times, shortening the strongest a lot faster and a lot more frequent than the weaker ones. And making sure that the strongest species also are allowed to be the biggest species. Now I'm going to finalize pruning this forest out. And with that I'm also going to finalize this video, because I think we've seen enough now on how one could tackle this. This is an interesting location because here this tree is actually crossing a lot of things. Yeah, let me just stop that off right now, because before it gets too big of an issue. There we go. And then this just becomes a very small tree in the back. I do hope you enjoyed this process. I know it's a little bit different from many of my other videos. On the other hand, it's also following a tree along for a long period of time to show what transitions take place. And after all, growing bonsai is just an accumulation of technique applied over multiple years. And with that, every small cut makes a big difference on the long term. And each individual cut is important, yet not that important that you can't fix something if you make the wrong cut. Last few little snips. And of course I am trying to make sure that the branches grow towards the light. So if I need to decide whether I'm going to keep or not, then I look at where's the branch position. So this branch grows out into the light, and here it would be growing into the forest. So this gets to develop. A branch like this I'm going to keep very short, just a few leaves. These I might eventually shorten, but these right now are actually the tallest trees. That's also not great. So let's break these a little bit. I want them to be a little bit shorter. And then I think I should stop pruning, because otherwise I'm going to prune the whole forest apart. This is now a young bonsai starting to take shape. I think it looks pretty good for what, 1-2 years development in this tray, and just a few years from cutting and seedling. Tell me what you think. Is this something that you also like? Are you doing something similar? Do you have videos of trees that you are making? Pop them down below in the comments and let me know what you're doing. This is now going to go back into the yard. It's ready for winter, and I'll see whether I keep it or not. It's been a nice little experiment. I'm not sure whether I want to keep it. If I don't keep it, this might not come back into a new video. Anyway, this was Jelle, growing bonsai. Keep doing that, but also keep experimenting.